All right, so I am going to knobcon on Saturday for like a couple hours maybe. I'm not gonna do a what I saw or what I'm excited about video. I have no plans for that. There's better channels and people in the synth news space to pay attention to get that stuff from than me. But I do want to see some stuff up close, talk to some manufacturers, and it's not too far away, so it's kind of convenient. This video, since it's kind of like a gear focused week, I thought I would do something that I've kind of had on the back burner for a little while, which is talk about every module I've ever sold. We look at my synths quite a lot on this channel, and I thought it's worth recapping and talking a little bit about all the things that haven't worked for me personally as a way of maybe sharing how I got to where I currently am. These are all, of course, very subjective opinions. Many of these things are popular modules that many people love. Some of them I still like, I'm a fan of. Other ones, not so much. So it's gonna be kind of rapid fire. And here we are, basement progress. The 2 notes video was kind of here. Guitar. Let's go. Early into modular, I got a 62 HP pallet case. I still have the case. It's kind of my overflow thing now. I built up a very Ricky Tinez inspired mono synth after having that for 1.5 years, sold the whole thing and started fresh. So we're gonna crank through those modules first really quickly and then get into a little bit more specifics and refining my current setup. This will make sense. First, IntelliGel Noise Random Tools 1U. It's fine. I've got noise sources in my current case with the Ritual electronic stuff. I don't think I have a slew limiter anymore that I'm aware of. Would I buy it again? Probably not. Doesn't excite me very much. Does it work? Yeah, it's fine. IntelliGel Steppy 1U. I basically think of this as a mini version of the Erica Synths drum machine. Same kind of focus on decoupling the trigger sequencing from the note melody sequencing. I also think of that drum machine as a general clock crazy trigger source for kind of anything, whether it be things you hear or not, which I appreciate. And I think kind of it goes way back to the early days of the Steppy 1U. Would I buy it again? Not in my current state. If I was getting into this, maybe. All right, Milky Way from Endorphins, the 6 HP version. It's fine. It's a couple effects in a little package. It's got a very specific sound to it. I don't miss it. Mimetic Digitalis, Noise Engineering. I actually would probably get this one again now that I understand the role it could play a little bit better than I did several years ago. I think it is an interesting approach to getting some rhythmic modulation in place. I can think of it as a much more better version of the role a Clep Diaz might play in my case now, instead of it being a melody sequencer, which is what I was trying to get it to do back then. Didn't really work for me for that. Endorphins, Sqwk Dirty to me, stereo filter. There's gonna be a common theme with me and Endorphins. Yes, I own a couple of Endorphins modules. Now, this filter was fine. I don't miss it. I wouldn't buy it again. I think a multi-mode digital filter is just not something I'm personally interested in. We'll say that. Qubit Scanned, really weird take on a unique approach to synthesis, capable of pretty wide variety of timbres and sounds. I don't miss it. Endorphins Airstreamer. Looking back in hindsight, when I started off in modular, I didn't really understand the role a VCA would play in, opening an envelope. I got kind of lucky that I bought the Airstreamer and it was able to have the VCA built in, handle a lot of that. As an envelope, kind of hated it. Was one of the ones that was hardest to sell, I'll say that. Once I had built up that palette case, I also had expanded my other kind of synth collection into other things like a DeepMind, Hydrasynth, Korg MS-20 Mini, still have that one. A couple of guitar pedals, Zoya, Fairfield Circuitry's Shallow Water, Microcosm, and I had it all set up with the kind of Polygon tracker as a brain, a couple of patch bays so I could repatch kind of anything to anything through all the guitar pedals, a key step, and I just didn't like it at the end. I had a kind of, call it a crisis. I think it was actually really productive for what it was in the end. And I sold everything, all of it. Just got rid of everything except things that I thought would be something that I could have as a standalone item in a collection in like 20 or 30 years. Hence the Korg MS-20 Mini sitting around. I think it's just nice to have something like that. The rest of it, all gone. That then I put into the first case, the green case that is now the A case today. And this is like the real beginning evolution of what is my current setup. So we're going to rip through this set of modules in the same reverse order now. First one's probably going to upset some folks, but this is one of my least favorite interfaces that I've ever had to deal with on a module. I partially blame the alternate firmware for adding more features than it ever needed, and that's Stages by Mutual Instruments. Man, did this thing have so many features that I could never use without looking them up every single time, to the point where I used it for like 2 things and got so sick of having to figure out which way knobs needed to turn and whether blinking or solid or red or yellow or green and gated or ungated determined what each of the 6 channels was going to do. Hated it, hated it, hated it. Was so glad that I sold it, even though I sold it for way under what it was, because that was right before I think the big chip shortage, but I do not miss that thing one bit. Now on the voice side of things, the first one to go that came into this version of the case and back out was Make Noise STO. Totally fine. I mean, what can you complain about a small HP? I think there was, a couple different waveform choices, if I remember correctly. There was a sub. Fine. Totally fine. Not very exciting. It does what it needs to do, and I don't know what I would complain about. I don't know. All right, this is going to be a twofer on the kind of brain side of things. When I first started building the bigger case, I thought what I needed was to, after purging my very MIDI-focused setup, have that same kind of role in driving and sequencing the new case. So I bought a Hermod. I thought, no brainer. This thing looks feature packed. It's great. It can do so many things. It's got MIDI. It's got the USB thing. 8 channels. Super boring. Man, I did make no good music with that thing. I know that some people love the grid and the piano roll, and that's the way of life for probably a lot of music production, probably the vast majority in this day and age. That's great. That's great. Super not for me. And when I tried to take what was my way of working that never really worked and bring it into this new way, the same thing was the outcome. Surprise. I kind of maybe overcorrected and got a teletype. And after experimenting with that a lot, I found that, man, I just didn't like coming to my synthesizer after spending all day at a keyboard and pulling out another keyboard. So really neat, super powerful, great for a different maybe time in my life or role. I'm not running out of shots already. You're running out of shots already. Next up, wrong Soundstage. Man, I love this thing. I still have it essentially in the jumble hinge. And did I almost buy the Soundstage 2? Yep. I was very close to, and then it was sold out before I was actually able to get it. I still might take the B case, even though I'm still working on the vortices and trying out how that works for me. I still might go back to the Soundstage in the B case. I just love that way of mixing, thinking about placing things, and it honestly helps so much with my rather chaotic zero headroom sound to just be able to automatically filter out and give each element a piece in the mix. Super recommend Soundstage 1. Soundstage 2 I'm sure is fantastic. And I love the ALM jumble hinge as a replacement just to kind of shrink the HP. I also will say I think the jumble hinge sounds a little bit better than the Soundstage 1. Soundstage 1 has that dip in volume around noon on the filter mix. And I also think the jumble hinge, although I don't know this for certain, I think that it has a tiny bit more resonance on all those filters. Sounds great. Super recommend. All right, the furnace is on down here now, so I apologize if you're picking up some of that. I'm never gonna learn my lesson with these The Bitbox is about to go the same way as this did Erica Synth sample drum. 2 channels, lots of sample management, pain, clunky interface with buttons that I could never remember what did what, built-in effects that I wouldn't use, mono support only. I didn't like it. I didn't like it. Don't miss it. I would not buy it again. All right, next, Happy Nerding FX Aid. Good sounds. Only could use maybe 3 or 4 of the effects before I forgot what was which. The knobs are way too close together. You can barely turn them stereo. I probably would not buy it again in my current state of things. Great multi-effect, if that's what you want in Tiny HP. It was cool when I had it, but I much prefer now my world of fewer effects with more customization to them. I'm spoiled by the Star Lab, call it that. Maybe another unpopular one, ALM, Pamela's new workout. This was my main clock for a while. I think it was fine. I tended to use a couple of the main features on it. I thought it had a decent set of capabilities. I found myself drifting away from a style of music that required those kinds of capabilities. I much prefer, even though the A case and B case, my current setup right now, are pretty different in the way clocks function. I really, really enjoy in the A case when it's by itself. I have no idea what BPM it is. I'm making a clock out of an LFO and a comparator or something else, and just kind of letting things happen. Using that little section of Ritual Electronics 1U modules and Logic and whatnot to create the gate patterns that I need to manipulate things in a kind of loose, not super controlled way is personally just so much more enjoyable. Really quick, back to back, I'm gonna do 2 in this shot. Noise Engineering Clep Diaz. Same kind of vibe to me there. Super structured modulation or stepped modulation. I think it was fun. I think it was a neat thing. It was one of the very few modules from the super early palette case I mentioned that obviously didn't sell until here. So we're kind of ways into things now. So that maybe has something going for it. I don't miss it. I probably wouldn't get it again, but I don't really have a need for it. This is gonna be another 2 for 1, but only because I literally had to list them together in order to sell them on Reverb because they were just sitting around for so long. And that's a couple of Mutable Instruments clones, one being grids and the other one being rings. I did not like rings. Many, many times I've thought about buying a full-size original just to see if there was something about the clone being smaller that took away from what it could do. I think it's an interesting idea. I'd like it as a resonator conceptually, but with where the case was going at the time, it was so far away from what I needed. Honestly, it probably could have pulled out of the case and now years on might have a much better role back in the A case at this point, but I don't really miss it. Grids, on the other hand, was kind of a lot of fun. I really enjoyed pairing grids with pressure points. When I originally had just one of the 2 pressure points I have now in the A case, I would use that as like a preset configurator for the grids, because you got the 3 outs on pressure points that can control the quantity or density of the kick, snare, and hat. And so you could really easily snap between different patterns. That was a lot of fun. I've also never felt like I was less of a drum part writer than when I had grids. It felt like I was cheating in a way that personally was so lingering that it took away from how much I valued and admired the things that I was creating, arguably for myself as the main audience. It was fun, but it didn't feel like it was my music. I'll say that. Mannequin's Cold Mac. The HP that this thing took up while I waited for the magic spark to occur, the romance, aesthetically, does it look nice? It does. It's got a like very timeless aesthetic to it in the role of modular and synthesizer design. Did it ever become a real, true tool in the bag of tricks that I felt like I could grab and use to do something that I was going to do all the time? No, never did. I think the survey knob approach thing was a cool concept, that I was never able to actually get it to deliver on within the context of a real piece of my music. I've heard great things about people being able to set up an entire patch where they twist that survey knob and it completely transforms things. And that's really what I wanted out of it. And I never got it. The Sqwk STMix, it's a good little mixer. I think I just pulled away from it and got into the Soundstage stuff and the Jumble Hench stuff and paired that cockpit mixer with the Golden Master. Looking back on it, I'd probably still have a use for this if I had it. Actually, come to think of it, the reason I got rid of it might be because I enjoyed W&D's Axis so much and realized that if I ever just needed to mix a couple of stereo channels together, I could probably get away with using Axis for it instead of the STMix, while also having all of the crazy features that Axis has, like CB controlled, DC coupled, dual stereo crossfaders, and for features to HP, it was just kind of a no-brainer for me to move on.
Up next, Broken Tape Simulator V2. This one was actually really neat. I kind of liked the glitchy, chaotic, weird, not so much delay, but almost like if a delay and a dial-up modem became one in a kind of cursed way. For what it was and the concept and the execution of it, I thought it was really cool. I just prioritized other effects over it because it was such a specific characteristic that it stood out like crazy in a mix, and you need to use it kind of sparingly. And I don't really have the room to have things that I just use super sparingly. So, all right, you didn't actually even see the video that I filmed on this. This is the Blue Catch Endless Processor. I had plans for this to replace beads in the A case. I was more excited about this than maybe any of the modules on this list when it was first mentioned to me. I think in terms of aesthetics, panel design, layout, it is basically the high bar for my personal preferences in module design. The thing looks like it's out of a science lab, and its goals and aspirations in terms of what it can do for you also are that kind of surrealist, experimentation, science-y kind of way. In reality, the dreams of dual mono, also meaning stereo, do not work at all here. You have to flick a physical switch and push buttons again to control each side of the dual mono. There's no like link switch to control both sides at once. The other huge issue I had with it was the amount of delay between pressing that yellow infinity button and it actually kicking in. This thing seems like it, at least in the firmware that I was using, waits till you push the button to begin even trying to analyze anything instead of kind of doing a constant analysis and being ready for the button press or the clock input on that. So there was a very noticeable delay between trying to switch to an endless version of an incoming signal and the incoming signal, to the point where at first, when I was a little disappointed with the volume or the characteristic difference on the memory thing not being too great, I thought, ooh, what if I just clock it at high speeds or even clock it on a rhythm? And you couldn't even clock it on a specific rhythm because of the delay lag, like latency, I'll say, in applying that endless effect to the incoming audio was so high that the only way I actually got it to be clocked on a rhythm was when I had the clock adjusted to the same amount of time as that delay, and then it would catch on the next beat. I was so bummed by this thing. I filmed a kind of a first impressions video on it. I was really excited, and it just felt like a great concept that I would love version 2. I'd probably buy version 2 if it came out, just to see if they could deliver on the idea, because I think the algorithm underneath the hood and the approach of resynthesis in this way. If you've seen any of my videos, you know how much I love the panharmonium and the idea around resynthesis. No, I don't have any plans to get a Spectrophone, but the endless processor I think could be really good, but it wasn't. All right, you might have seen the video I did on this one. It's the Qubit Nautilus. Databender just beat it out for like effect per HP impact on my particular case layout. I do think the different modes that it offers, the ability to high pass or low pass, the kind of delay lines are really, really neat. They had a huge amount of impact on the characteristic of the sound. I thought it was really great. I thought my ability to understand what mode I was in terms of the way the delay lines interacted with each other was terrible. I could never remember the different color codes for that thing. The bubble knob or like spread or whatever those things were never really delivered on the promise. Of course, for my particular sound coming out of that case, there's already so much going on in the stereo field that I don't know if I would even notice it. You might need a more subtle incoming sound to make that deliver on what it's kind of your expectation of it is. At the same time, I think it's a really solid delay. I thought it was a lot of fun. It just didn't beat Data Bender. So 1 qubit for the other qubit in that sense. All right, last one, at least for what has been sold, is Maths. What's there not to say about it? I mean, I used it for its envelopes, which I loved how snappy they were. They were super, super quick and plucky, and I really appreciated that aspect about it. The different voltage attenuators were super handy. The kind of embedded logic and the way the different channels worked together, I also really kind of appreciated. I just moved my envelopes over to Zadar because of HP constraints and not using or utilizing the rest of the features. And in my setup, where I'm kind of ruthless about not expanding the case and just refining the space that I've got, Maths had to go. I don't really miss it because I have the same things in different places, but I think it is a neat tool, and it makes sense the kind of esteem that it has in terms of a patch programming style tool and utility that can do a lot of things for a lot of different case setups, especially if folks are just starting out. So I get it. I like that I had a Maths. I don't regret owning it. I just probably wouldn't buy it again unless I completely bail on the A case, B case setup and get one of those massive wall things, which I have zero plans on doing at this point. So, all right, there's a handful of others that I have kind of waiting to list. Of those is probably going to be the Polygogo. I love that oscillator, but I just don't have the room for it anymore, and I don't ever see that changing. And for now, why not let somebody else enjoy it? The Bitbox. It's not working out. I might go Morphogene. I've never really wanted to go Morphogene, but I might. What else? I've got a Lapsus Oz that is not cased right now that I don't want to get rid of because I really, really enjoy that thing. Similarly, I've got a Zagerzeb that is not cased right now that I don't want to get rid of because I enjoy that. So my overflow setup, I might end up getting a little like tip-top happy ending rack to go in a little 3U slot I've got to store a little bit more of the overflow and shift my palette case from overflow into being a cassette focused setup with the Air Instruments Loopman that I've got in there. But that's the kind of state of my reverb sale history, I'll call it. Oh wait, another one of my favorites that I sold that I look back on fondly is Drezno. I think that as an idea, it is extremely unique. Beyond that of the endless processor, you know, the idea of putting an ADC and a DAC next to each other and letting you screw up the way the bits move back and forth is such a neat concept to me that I probably would buy one again in the future. That might be one of the only ones on this list. I'm glad that someone else gets to use it and play with it because it is incredible at generating rhythms, adding crazy characteristics to sounds, and just being a completely unique tool that I've not really interacted with anything else like it in a long time. So I don't completely miss it. Yeah, I do. I miss it a little bit. All right, like I said at the beginning of the video, I am going to be at knobcon on Saturday for just a couple of hours. I think I want to see some stuff from manufacturers in person and talk to a few people and just figure out how I can improve the A case and B case a little bit more and see what else I might be able to tweak to improve things. If you see me wandering around and want to say, hey, feel free. I'm not going to do like a, here's what I'm excited about announcement video. There's other places that you can get that stuff from. I'm just kind of going to check stuff out for me personally as a musician. And I'm excited, looking forward to that. I've never been to a synth shop in person, if you don't count Guitar Center. I'm sure there'll be a point in the future where I have to update this list. Again, like I mentioned, there's a handful of things that I want to sell that I just haven't yet. And the process of refining this A and B case setup for me is always ongoing as I adjust things and tweak things. And so maybe next year there'll be another video where the list is, twice as long. Or maybe I'll do a video where I talk about the kind of non-modular stuff that I also sold in that kind of big sell-off. We'll see. It's a smaller space that I currently have now, but it won't also have to be a guest room. So that's kind of nice. I'm looking forward to it. Till next time, or maybe see you Saturday. I don't know. Peace.